Known as the movie capital of the world, bringing films to audiences that provide entertainment and at times thought-provoking drama, Hollywood recently hosted a different kind of media through a unique forum broadcast live worldwide on Supreme Master Television on Saturday, July 26, 2008. The Climate Change International Conference was held at the Pacific Design Center in West Hollywood, California, USA. Organized by the Supreme Master Qinghai International Association, it was a conference that brought together green Hollywood celebrities and notable speakers. Co-hosted by Emmy Award-winning television journalist and vegan Jane Velez Mitchell, the event was informative and the subject matter highly relevant. 3 panels were conducted, each with a different theme: the urgent scientific facts of the climate crisis, its spiritual perspectives, and the transformational role of the media. Invited as a special guest speaker, Supreme Master Qinghai graciously attended via live video conference to answer questions from the panelists as well as the audience. We now invite you to join us for the rebroadcast of the Climate Change International Conference.
My question is, why is it that Al Gore never talks about vegetarianism or veganism?
I can't answer for Al Gore. I mean, I can just speak for myself and for the facts, and the facts, as we have already discussed, are that if you do go vegetarian, you will help to save the planet.
But he has all these websites, and I've contacted those websites, and I say, why are you talking about light bulbs and transportation when the biggest cause of global warming, according to the United Nations, is meat production? And you know what they say? We don't want to go there. I have that as a quote. I called as a journalist.
Could you give us your perspective on the meat industry, please? What is its impact on our present situation?
Sure. I wanted to talk about the connections more generally also between food and climate change. And I want to start off by briefly highlighting 2 conditions of our world today that I think are important to keep in mind. One is agriculture, both the production of plants and animals, is the single largest human land use out there on the planet. Agriculture contributions to greenhouse gases is quite enormous, as you were saying. In terms of carbon dioxide, 21 to 25% of anthropogenic human-made emissions are from agriculture, about 60% of methane from agriculture, and 65 to 80% of nitrous oxides. And as Dr. Singh was saying, methane is 30 times more potent approximately than carbon dioxide, and nitrous oxides is 200 times more potent per molecular weight than carbon dioxide. So these ones matter too. We need to address all of them. And then the other thing I want to highlight is the extreme inequalities in the world today that we have. We have a handful of billionaires own more wealth or as much wealth as the 48 poorest countries in the world, and that's about 3 billion people, about half the world's population. This kind of inequality in wealth also translates into food access, and so we have between 800 million and now maybe 1 billion or more people without adequate access to food on this planet. That's close to 1/6 of the population. We've seen food riots around the world in various countries as a manifestation of this inequality. And the world economic system basically doesn't work for those people who can't afford to purchase food. So what I mean by this is that we basically have enough food. We do have enough food to feed everyone on the planet, but we're not doing so. Millions of people have inadequate diets. So I want to highlight those 2 propositions and then talk from there. Basically, as we've been saying, meat really matters. The Agricultural Sustainability Institute here at UC Davis recently had an international conference looking at the effects of, or the low-carbon diet, as we might call it, trying to move diets towards lesser climate change impacts. And in the report coming out of the workshop, note this is academics who typically highlight uncertainty. The issue of plant protein versus animal protein is not a high priority for new research, as existing research has already overwhelmingly demonstrated that plant proteins are almost always environmentally superior to protein from livestock from the perspective of energy intensity and greenhouse gas emissions. So we have about 56 billion animals on the planet that are slaughtered annually. They consume about 80% of the world's soybean crop and about 50% of the world's corn crop. It's quite astounding when you look at it that way. Livestock's production contribution to greenhouse gases is greater than the transportation sector. That's quite amazing as well, in that we usually think of driving and flying when we think of reducing our own emissions, or alternatives to driving and flying, like bikes and so forth. So why is this the case? I just want to go back to the food chain that's feeding the animals. First, of course, fossil fuel inputs are used in the growing of the feed. So that means we're turning natural gas into synthetic fertilizer. It's a very energy-intensive process. We burn gas to do that. Modern pesticides, very similar thing. Also, we transport that grain using fossil fuels to feed the animals, since we have a disconnect now between concentrated animal feedlot operations and the feeding systems. And the third, though, is the most important, and that is whenever an organism eats food, it gets energy from that and also turns it into body mass. But during that conversion, you lose about 90% of the energy in that food. Yeah, it's rough. So as Howard was saying, we have a situation in which it takes about 16 pounds of grain in order to make 1 pound of meat. In addition to that, of course, we've highlighted the methane contribution. That is, livestock contribute a great deal to other greenhouse gases, not just carbon dioxide. Animal agriculture is responsible for about 37% of all anthropogenic methane emissions and about 65% of all nitrous oxides emissions. That's animal agriculture alone. And of course, we have a great deal of energy going into heating and cooling concentrated animal feedlot operations, and we also have a vast amount of energy that it takes to keep the meat cold once you slaughter it and move it to the consumer. All of that is very energy intensive and therefore emits greenhouse gases. So in the scientific community now, people are embracing what's called life cycle analyses to look at all of the various inputs and the impacts that they have when you take something from the farm all the way to having it at your fork. So when you do that and you look at a kilogram of beef, the equivalent of 36 kilograms of carbon dioxide are emitted for that. If we look at pork, it's about 6 kilograms, so it's 6 times more efficient. But if we look at dry pea,